Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Boys, come on, join the class. Come sit with us. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. So today, inshallah, we're going to start hadith number 39, and inshallah, we hope to cover it briefly. Hadith number 39 is narrated by Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن الله تجاوز لي عن أمتي الخطأ والنسيان وما استكره عليه. حديث حسن رواه ابن ماجه والبيهقي. Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma narrated, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has pardoned for my nation, for me, on my behalf. Tajawaz ali, mistaken, whatever is done mistakenly, out of forgetfulness or under duress. Inshallah, if the parents of these kids can stay with them, inshallah, please make sure that they can play, but just not be too loud, inshallah. So, the Prophet ﷺ says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has pardoned for my nation what is done mistakenly, out of forgetfulness, and under duress. This hadith is actually a well-known principle in Islamic legal theory, right? Whenever, and even, for example, in American law, that if you can prove that if you committed a crime mistakenly or forgetfulness, I'm not sure if that's a defense, or being forced to do something, then in that case, I believe that in American law, in many cases, you are not completely forgiven, but your penalty may be greatly decreased. You won't necessarily walk away if you broke somebody's window because somebody had a gun to your head. You would not maybe go to jail, but you may still have, some answering to do. But the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, of course, much greater, and the knowledge and wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is limitless. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as a special favor, because the Prophet says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَجَاوَزَ لِي. Li meaning that as a special favor for me, as for my ummah, He has overlooked that which is done mistakenly, out of forgetfulness, and under duress. But of course, like we said, that it's a major principle that is used in so many aspects of the Islamic law. So, for example, if a person was to pray their salah, having forgotten that they broke their wudu, right? So normally, for a person to make their salah without wudu, knowingly, is a major sin, in the sense that the scholars have said that this is a person mocking the religion. This is, for a person knowingly praying without wudu, is a type of mocking the religion, that they know that this is something that is required, but they're doing it without. So it's like if you are making a cake without essential cake elements that you know, the only reason why you would do that if you didn't take the cake seriously, if you didn't take making of that cake seriously. So in the same way with regards to salah as well. Brothers, this is a very distracting, I'm sorry. But sisters as well, if there are kids, we'd like to request parents of younger kids that are mothers, please go in that room or that room over there. And brothers, if you have any kids, you can use that room. I don't see any sisters over there. And I really don't like doing this, but sometimes it's just a bit too much. I don't know, the way the sound travels, that it feels like it's all coming over here. I don't mean to call anybody out. So, So what we want to understand is what are the limits of what is meant by doing something mistakenly. What are the limits of doing something out of forgetfulness? What are the limits of doing something out of being forced or being under duress? So, okay. Hey, assalamu alaikum. How are you doing? Welcome back. Did you have fun in Egypt? Yes. Okay. All right. Go sit over there, okay, so I can do my class. So there are a number of narrations which are very similar in meaning. And because of the brevity of time, we're going to basically go for that one, which is the most authentic, which is that the one that we mentioned earlier, which is exactly those words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has pardoned from my nation, what is done by mistake, out of forgetfulness, and or under duress. So it is obvious that mistakes, forgetfulness, and coercion occur among the Muslim nation, right? These things are reality, it happens. The hadith itself is open to being interpreted as the sinful nature of the act is overlooked and pardoned. It is also open to mean that all of the rulings associated with the acts are to be pardoned, as if the act itself never occurred. And all scholars seem to agree that the sinful nature of the act is definitely removed. Okay, so that means that if a person was so actually, there was a case where a police officer shot a man in his own house. And the police officer shot the man, and the defense of this police officer was that the police officer was mistaken, and she thought that this was her house, and there was a foreign man, like a strange man in her house, so she shot him in his own house, okay? Now, we're not going to go into the details of that case. I think that she was convicted of homicide, and it was not an acceptable defense to the jury. But if we were to, let's say, take that as 100% true as the fact that that's what happened. So what we're saying, that the scholars agree that if somebody did a mistake like that, then it would not be sinful. It will not be something that would lead them to hellfire because it was a true and honest mistake. Let's say that it was, okay? But does she still have to pay a penalty? In Islamic law, if you kill someone mistakenly, meaning that you weren't intending to kill this person, you were shooting a deer, and when you shot it, things happened, and somebody else, suddenly stepped forward. But because your action led to it, and maybe you knew that there was a person, but you were just trying to avoid the person, but hit the deer or whatever. If it's proven that there was something that you could have done to prevent it, but you weren't actually intending to kill the person, in that case, you may not be sinful, you may not go to jail, you may not get executed in exchange, but you may still have to pay blood money, which was 100 camels, which until today is the price of 100 camels, okay? So if somebody was like speeding, and they cause an accident, is a prime example of mistake, right? Vast majority of crashes that take place, nobody intends to do them, right? Usually, it is a complete mistake where, maybe somebody didn't see anything or some things like that. Or sometimes, or many times, it's due to somebody's negligence, okay? Somebody thinks that they could beat a red light when they really could not have. Somebody going a bit too fast, the other person expecting them to be coming down 30 miles an hour when they saw them in the distance, but they didn't realize that this person was coming down 90 miles per hour. And they arrived there way faster than what would have been normal, right? So in cases like this, of course, the scholars would go into more detail and figure out, okay, exactly what is going on, how much of a mistake it is, how much of forgetfulness it is, how much of duress it is. So they say that the worldly ramifications of that, there is difference of opinion on that. Some of the scholars said, well, if we can prove that it happened completely unintentionally, then the person who did it, there's no legal ramifications. The others said, well, okay, if this guy walks away, who is going to make the guy who was hurt whole again, right? So in some cases, for example, if there was Islamic State, if there was an authority that stepped in and said, okay, we will take care of it. Okay, so there is a case where it is said that Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh, he was a person that he naturally spoke very loud. His voice was very loud. And when he called out in his full bluster, people would get scared. So in one such occasion, he called somebody out in that full bluster for some reason in the marketplace. And there happened to be a woman nearby who was expecting. And because of the sudden stress and fear of that loud voice, she had a miscarriage. So this case, it went to court. Okay, now, subhanAllah, the justice of the Islam is that Amirul Mu'mineen is being taken to court. The case comes to court, and who is the judge? The judge is Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiyallahu anhu. So Ali radiallahu anh ruled that Umar radiallahu anh is blameless because this is something that is natural and this is not within his control. However, the woman has to be paid blood money, but it will be paid by the state. Okay, so she was paid the price of 100 camels because she had a miscarriage due to somebody else's loud voice. Because it caused it, but because it was a well-known thing about Umar radiallahu anh. It wasn't that one time that he was very loud, but rather, what we would call noise pollution, right? But because it was a well-known fact about him throughout his life, so they said that Ali radiallahu anh ruled that he is blameless, but the state will pay her blood money to make her whole again. So that's where basically the difference of opinion is, that does the woman just walk away saying, oh, it was somebody's mistake, nothing, no penalty, no compensation, nothing? Or the scholars say that, well, the person who did it is sinless and non-punishable by law, but this person has to be made whole again. So if you notice that the ayat that we recited in Surah Al-Baqarah, the end of them, one of the ayat is لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. Right, the famous last ayah of Surah Al-Baqarah, in which we say, our Lord, punish us not if we forget or make a mistake. لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. And then, the other dua continues. So this supplication is made as a way of seeking the continuance of that great blessing upon this nation. Meaning that, Ya Allah, we ask you not to abrogate this ruling. Keep it as is, as a mercy from you. Do not discontinue this ruling that what is done out of mistake is forgiven. So there are proofs that demonstrate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not hold one to account for the mistakes that he makes, as we mentioned in the ayah. And that this dua that was made, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted this dua, and that's why he basically copied it in the Quran, that this is one of the duas that you should make, and this is a dua that Allah has accepted and looked favorably upon. So does the pardoning of mistakes include mistakes concerning matters that are considered definitive? Okay, so for example, so there are some mistakes which are like, well, is it really a mistake or not, right? So for example, somebody comes in the masjid and they have their feet facing the Qibla, okay? For some people, this is something that you're not supposed to do. For other cultures, it's not a big deal as long as you don't intend anything, right? So this is not a definitive matter. This is not 100% right or wrong, is not clear in this, okay? This is a matter of etiquette for some. For others, it's not even a matter of etiquette. If you didn't intend any harm, then there's no problem. So matters that are definitive are things like your salah. Okay, so if somebody mistakenly prayed the wrong salah, or somebody mistakenly prayed the salah at the wrong time, or somebody mistakenly or out of forgetfulness completely forgot the salah, okay, is that person pardoned for this or not? He is someone who missed out, he made a mistake on something which is 100% sure shot, right? It's every day of the year. There's no day where you're like, well, I think today is the off day for prayer. There's no such thing. So how could it be that somebody could forget something so definitive? The conclusion is that Allah's mercy is so great that He even forgives those who commit errors concerning matters of definitive nature. if it is truly a mistake, right? As long as, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. So in addition, a Muslim does not automatically become an apostate or heretic or even an evildoer, a fasiq, due to a mistake that he has made, even though the act he performed or statement he made is one of disbelief or heresy or of a serious sinful nature, okay? So, for example, someone is cleaning out their library, and they have good books in there, they have bad books in there, and they say, well, some of these books, they're just trash because they're not Islamic books. So they basically take out any type of novels and, detective stories and magazines and stuff like that. So they say, you know what, these ones, they don't have to be properly discarded, so I'm just going to throw them in trash, okay? By mistake, somehow a Quran found its way into that pile, okay? And this person, not realizing, they went and they threw the whole thing in trash. And somebody finds it, okay? Now, you know that in much of the Muslim world, if anybody does a mistake like that, they are most likely going to pay with their life. There is very little tolerance for this type of mistake in many parts of the Muslim world. People are ignorant and they're unforgiving. Okay? They are ignorant and they're unforgiving. They are not going to look for any explanations. They're not even going to give the person a chance to explain themselves. And this has happened many times. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from such ignorance. So even though that act of throwing a Quran in trash could take a person out of the fold of Islam if a person did it intentionally. But in this case, if he did it as an honest mistake, had no ideas, maybe sometimes I make a pile of stuff and then my kids come and they mess everything up. They put from this pile to that pile to this pile, all that type of stuff, and somebody does that. So in that case, what we're saying is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives the honest mistakes. However, Allah's forgiveness for those who are mistaken does not mean that one remains silent in the face of mistakes of others, okay? Now, if we are there and we see somebody making such a mistake, whether it's a mistake of a sinful nature or a mistake that can lead a person to kufr, so if we see that, we have to address that. We cannot remain silent about it, right? Now, the first thing should be is that a person says, hey, do you know that there's a Quran in this pile? And that person might say, oh, astaghfirullah, I didn't mean it like that. Thank you for telling me, and he immediately takes it out, okay? Or another person maybe is doing it out of ignorance. They had no idea that you're not supposed to do this. He says, yeah, I don't need this Quran anymore. And isn't that what you're supposed to do when you don't need it anymore? And you're like, no, you're not supposed to do that with the Quran. There's a proper way of disposal of the Quran. Or a third person who says, well, you know what? I've been reading this book and this book has done no good for me. Na'udhu billah. And now this person could be in serious trouble for making such a statement like that. So if we see somebody making a mistake, if we see a new Muslim praying the wrong way, okay, that new Muslim is forgiven. But what we need to do is if we see them, we say, hey brother, assalamu alaikum, my name is so-and-so. I saw you praying and I was just wondering that, do you have resources? Because I thought that there was something that we all can improve on our prayer, and there was something that I noticed as well. Is there anybody that's helping you learn the prayer? Because maybe there is somebody, and you cannot expect a person to learn their perfect prayer on day 2 of their shahada, right? Maybe this person literally became Muslim this morning, right? And I had a brother coming here, a brother in humanity, okay? As some of you may remember him. He was coming at Fajr time, and he was wearing very short shorts, okay? And he would come and he would sit here at Qiyamul Layl time, and then he would pray in Jama'ah with us as well. So one day I saw him, second day I saw him, third day I saw him. I said, okay, this person is, obviously he's not getting the point. So I spoke to him. I said, hey, I just want to let you know that, when we come to the masjid, the minimum that we're supposed to cover is up to the knees. So inshallah, tomorrow if you could wear full pants. So he said to me, he said that, yeah, somebody already gave me, an earful about that, Okay. And he was upset about that somebody had given him an earful. I don't know who that person was and how they talked to him. But subhanAllah, the man never came back to the masjid again. So a few days ago, I actually emailed him. I said, hey, I haven't seen you. Because of course, we would rather have a Muslim who wears shorts than a non-Muslim who wears whatever, right? Meaning it's better to be a person who is not properly dressed in the masjid than to be a person who's not coming to the masjid and not even coming to Islam at all. So he said, well, my schedule changed and that's why I'm not able to come. So I told him that, hey, here are the daily prayers. We have different prayers all throughout the day. If you can't make it to Fajr because of your new job, inshallah, see if you can attend at another time, right? But we have to pay these attention. But if someone is doing it, we do have to let them know in the most respectful, kindest way. Usually, they say that it's better not to assume that they are doing it knowingly. It's better to assume that they don't know any better. Okay, and ask them, hey, do you know that this is the rule or what? Or, whatever way you can come up with where you're not even implying in your question that this person is intentionally breaking the rules, okay? But rather say, hey, have you've been learning about Islam? He's like, yeah, I started reading about it 2 weeks ago. I'm like, okay, so have you read anything about like dress code or anything yet? He's like, no, I haven't read anything. Okay, so you know that this person hasn't gotten to that point yet, right? Or as opposed to someone who says, yeah, I read about it, it doesn't really make a big difference to me. That's a different approach you have to deal with. So, just keep that in mind, that if we see somebody, we have to address it in the best possible manner. Sometimes it may be that we don't address it, but we address it through somebody else, okay? If this is a person, new Muslim coming, and he's coming with his best friend, who is a Muslim. So maybe it would be better to talk to his best friend and say, hey, do you know that this is your friend? And, can you talk to him about this? So instead, one must still advise them and show them their errors based on evidence from the Quran and Sunnah. What does it mean to do something out of forgetfulness? An aspect that is stressed in the definition of forgetfulness is that it is temporary situation and not caused by some sort of permanent disease or a habit, okay? So for example, a person who normally prays Salatul Fajr, and one day he forgot to set his alarm, or sometimes, when time changes, right? That's a very common date. The day that you miss your Fajr is when time changes, and you forgot to adjust your alarm accordingly, and you woke up a bit late when Salah had already passed. That's forgiven. As opposed to a person who every single day misses Fajr out of forgetfulness. In this case, this is a different case. This is not forgetfulness, but rather a bad habit or a disease of laziness, or maybe they actually have some sort of a disease, which may be another reason for forgetfulness, right? That if a person is not able to perform an act, let's say that, I have a relative who has some sort of condition that if they sit down, they will fall asleep. If they sit down, they will fall asleep. He cannot drive, because if he drives, he will fall asleep. So those are special circumstances, and whenever it's out of a person's control, it's out of a person's control. Indeed, the person is fully competent, but some matter has slipped his mind at that particular time, while perhaps even in just a few moments, the person will be fully aware of the matter that he may have temporarily forgotten, right? So a common case is, and it has happened to me, it has happened to other people that I know, is that somebody came and they prayed, but they forgot that they had used the bathroom maybe 30 minutes before, and they had planned to make wudu, but they forgot about it. And now when salah time came, out of habit, because normally they have wudu, so out of habit, they just got up and prayed, okay? When is forgetfulness not an excuse? So if a person could have taken the steps to prevent his forgetfulness, or the act that occurred as a result of this forgetfulness, then he's not excused. So, for example, somebody who says, I can't wake up for Fajr because my body doesn't wake me up. So it's okay. So do you have a TV in your house? Yeah, I do. Do you have a computer in your house? Yeah, I do. Do you have a cell phone? Yeah, I do. Okay. Do you have a microwave in your house? Yeah, I do. Have you ever heard of something called an alarm clock? Right? Or do you know that there are apps that will set an alarm for you? Is everything okay? Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. How did this door open? So, so there are apps that you are supposed to have, right? So it could be that there is somebody who is just completely, ambivalent to this, has no idea about it. Understandable. May Allah forgive them. However, there are things which are normal. In that case, you say, okay, well, now I've told you about it. Now you don't have an excuse anymore, right? So if you're waking up late every day and you're not taking the steps to prevent it, then this is something that a person is responsible for in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Same thing, the scholars gave an example that let's say that a person saw that a drop of impurity got on their clothes. And a person said, oh, I'll take care of it later. Although they could have just taken 1 minute and basically rubbed it with some clean water and maybe put some napkin on it to absorb it. And they would have been cleansed right then and there. And then later on, they forgot to remove it. And then they made their salah with it. Then 30 minutes later, they remember, oh, my clothes had gotten impure at that time. They have to remake their salah. They have to remake their salah. And they may be sinful for their laziness, in this case, to do something that could have been done very quickly. There's a book out there, it's called Getting Things Done, right? It's a whole system called GTD by David Allen. And he has a rule. He says that if there is anything that comes up that you need to do, if it takes 2 minutes or less, then do it right then and there, okay? Don't defer anything that will take you 2 minutes or less. So this is a classic example. It will take you 30 seconds to just wash that place off. So it will be completely out of your, brain. Your brain doesn't have to be busy with this. So just get it done right now, right here. If he later prays with the same impurity on his clothes, he will not be excused, as it was due to his own lack of action. Same thing we say with regards to people's cell phones, right? That a person came in, their cell phone rang, first time, acceptable, okay? But second time, third time, fourth time, over an extended period, like some people, like during Jummah khutbah, their phone rings one time, okay? Now you're not in salah, and this is a necessary action. So the first time your phone rang, may Allah forgive you, right now you should take the step to turn it on vibration or silent mode or whatever you have to do. If it rings second time, third time, then it is your fault, right? Because why didn't you do what should have been done? So a lot of, whenever we see, for example, kids, whenever we see irresponsible behavior from people, whether they're kids or they're adults, it's forgiven the first time, but now, okay, this is the way to correct the situation. You need to take this step, right? One of the signs of maturity in a person is that they're able to watch how they sleep, when they wake up. If they have appointments, they arrive on time, right? If somebody is trying to contact them, they are responsive in their contact and those type of things. But if somebody is irresponsible continuously and doesn't change, then this is not something which is excusable. This is something where actually he may need to meet Umar ibn al-Khattab and get some correction, medicine, and then they will be fixed. Then they will be fixed. Now, the third thing that the Prophet mentions is forgiven is anything which is done under duress. Under duress. So, coercion, someone being forced to do such a thing. So, let me ask you, is there anything that you can think of, an example in our life, our situation right here, that you are ever forced to do something? Car insurance, okay? Car insurance is definitely a good example where it is the law. Okay, so in this case, a person has to, of course, it's very difficult to live without having a car. So you need to have car insurance. But by the way, the scholars say that you are supposed to have the minimum possible car insurance. That it is not that, okay, well, since it's allowed, so let me get the maximum thing, okay? And we've talked about insurance before, that things like when you buy like plane tickets, they always offer you, pay an extra $14 and protect your purchase. Those things are actually not considered halal because they are not, they are basically, they fall in the category of gambling, where you are saying, okay, maybe I will make it big, or I will lose whatever I'm putting up. So whenever you buy a TV, whenever you buy a cell phone, they say, hey, pay extra and you will get this. They say the only exception to this is, for example, when the manufacturer offers you a service, right? So for example, you're buying an Apple device, and they say that this device comes with 1 year of Apple Care. Anything happens will be covered. And if you pay this much extra, then you are getting another 2 years of Apple Care. So they say that this here is a service plan as opposed to a gamble, okay? Because it is offered by the manufacturer themselves. Now, if you get a third party that says, hey, if you pay $14 a month, if your laptop falls in water, we will give you the whole money back. So in this case, that $14, you're not sure if you're getting anything in return for that $14, okay? You're not getting anything because it may happen, it may not happen. So the scholars, based on studying the technicalities of the ruling, they allowed an exception from manufacturer warranty, okay? But any type of insurance is not allowed, and the only exception by the majority of the scholars is those types of matters which are too great for a normal person to cover. So they say that property insurance, home property insurance, medical insurance, and auto insurance, okay? Any other type, they say that these are the ones that fall into the category which you should stay away from. And the way to protect yourself, by the way, is to build an emergency fund, right? So if you have an emergency fund of, they say that you should have 3 to 6 months of expenses in an emergency fund. So if you bought tickets for $1,000 and your plans changed, if you have an emergency fund, you will not fall into dire necessity. You will not fall into desperation because you have an emergency fund which is exactly for this purpose, to take care of emergencies that happen and you take a sudden loss. But inshallah, if a person avoids these things out of taqwa, out of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect you, right? I tell you, when my insurance is, read Ayatul Kursi, okay? Say, Ya Allah, I'm leaving this in your protection. Now, if you put something in the protection of Allah and it still gets destroyed, in that case, you should be happy and not sad. Why? Because it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forcing you to look somewhere where you would not have looked had it not happened, even though you put it in the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah is saying, I'm taking this away from you because I have something better for you. Go look for it. It's right there. Okay? So many times, difficulties lead to great, opening of new doors that you would not have opened had that difficulty not come upon you. So if you place in the protection of Allah, then be worry-free, inshallah. Is it loud for you as well? Okay. Okay. Inshallah, once again, a reminder to please have younger kids, please go into the rooms with, soundproofing, inshallah. So, what is coercion? What is coercion? So, let's say that a person, somebody says, hey, I'm thinking of a realistic scenario, okay? So, sometimes what happens is, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all, in criminal situations, in criminal gangs. Sometimes people, they get involved in a gang before they become Muslim. Then they become Muslim and then they want to get out, but you know that they don't let you out of the gangs, right? They say that you can't just walk away from us. So they have different things, but one of the things that they do in gangs is that they test your loyalty. And the way they test your loyalty is by making you commit a crime. Okay? if you commit a crime, number one, now you yourself have become a criminal, so you have less of a reason to leave this gang because you're not pure anymore. So you're not going to leave these dirty people. And number two is that if you happen to be an undercover police officer, if you're a spy or something like that, you're not going to commit a crime. Okay? So sometimes there have been cases, like I've read about it with brothers in prison, that they were part of a gang and then they found Islam, they became Muslim. So the gang says that we will have to beat you out. Okay, where basically the procedure is that a few of their gang members will come and this guy has to stand and they will beat him to a pulp, but they will leave him breathing. But sometimes you could get like internal bleeding. You could end up dying from such a beating. Like there will be no mercy. They will beat you. If you survive that, you're out with this gang. Okay, so sometimes they say, well, if you don't do this, we're going to do such and such to you. If you don't do this, we're going to do such and such to you. And in prison, there's a lot of crime internally. They'll say, go and you have to hurt this person or that person. So let's say that a person was in this situation. Now they're making tawbah, they're getting out of it. But they have this guy that they never really got along with. Okay? So their gang says, well, you have to go and beat up that guy. And the guy says, well, you know what? This is something I've been waiting for years. Now I have the cover that I am being forced to do it by the gang. So what else can I do? Okay, well, I'll compromise. And he goes and he beats him up. So they say that no, the true coercion in which a person is excused is that a person is under threat and they also dislike the act itself. Okay? It cannot be that you were under coercion, but you actually kind of enjoyed the act. Okay? In this case, you are still responsible and sinful in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for some part of it. However, so they say that if the person was left alone, they would not do such an act. They only did it because they were in this situation. In that case, it would be considered a coercion. However, due to coercion for others, he performs the act against his will from others. His intention is not actually to perform the act itself, but to avert the threatened punishment. Okay, he wasn't trying to actually hurt this person. He was under threat that if you don't do this, then we're going to hurt your kid on the streets outside. That's sometimes a threat is like that, because the person says, I'm already in prison, you can do with me whatever you want. So they know that this person won't be moved by this. They will say that your wife and kids live at such and such address, and here are pictures, we are watching them. If you don't go and do this, we're going to go and visit them. Okay, now this becomes, of course, a very serious threat. Recently there was a book that was written by one of the Muslim prisoners in Guantanamo, and one of the ways that they tortured him is that there was a woman who was, I believe she was a guard, but she basically went in the room next to him and she made like sounds as if she was being beaten and cried, and na'udhu billah, that somebody was really disrespecting her purity, chastity. And they told her that this is your mother. This is your mother in the room next to you, and she is here because you are not giving us the information that we need to hear. So he said, look, please stop. Whatever you want me to sign, I will sign it. So they wrote him a letter that, I did this and I hired this guy and I recruited him and I did this and I did that. And he said, just anything that you want, I will sign it. Please don't do this to my mother. Okay? Of course, later on, it turned out that it was all a tactic to get him to sign that confession. So true coercion is when a person is under threat for their own safety and things like that, and also because their safety of the people outside is under threat as well. So they say that when it comes to studying such a case, there is the person who is doing the coercion, the person who's being coerced, the threat of the one who is doing the coercion, and the act that one is being coerced to perform. All of these things have to be looked at, right? So for example, they say that the one who is doing the coercion, right? So let's say that I'm a 350-pound guy, and a 150-pound guy comes to me and he says, hey, if you don't do this, I'm going to punch you, right? You're like, is that really a threat? Are you serious about that, right? So they say that coercion is considered coercion if the person who is threatening you is actually capable of fulfilling that harm, the threat that they are making to you, right? If they're saying to you a threat which they really have no authority over, they are, whether they are ruler or they're not, they're just making an empty threat and you know that this is not possible for them to do. In that case, if you still fulfill their request, or not their request, their demand or their threat, you do what they're asking, then you may be responsible. Number two is that are you really in a position to be coerced, right? Meaning, again, a 300-pound guy does not have to be scared of getting punched by a 100-pound guy. So, at worst, they say that if it is a threat, but the threat itself, the threat, that's the third category, is not such a severe threat, okay? So, for example, in the cases where they say that a scholar receives a messenger from the government, says, we need you to sign this fatwa. He says, I don't agree with this fatwa and I don't want to sign it with my name, okay? They want to use the name of the scholar to be able to push a certain narrative. He says, I'm not going to sign it. He says, if you don't sign it, you're going to go to jail for 6 months, okay? So the scholar has to assess, and sometimes, and there have been many cases in the past, where they said, well, you know what, I would rather take the threat, I would rather go to prison for 6 months than sign my name to such a thing, okay? And you know the example of Yusuf alayhi salam himself. He said that, Ya Allah, if there's no way for me to get out, like what they were threatening him with was, you have to commit this sin. And he said that, Ya Allah, I would rather go to prison than to commit this sin, okay? So he did not use the threat of coercion to let himself do that sin, because the punishment that they were threatening was not so much more severe than the act itself here. Okay, so he said, I'd rather do that than this. So, anybody know of anybody like this, a real case? Somebody who went to prison for something that they did not feel was the right thing to do? Imam Ahmed, okay. Anybody from recent times? A famous person, you all know him. Muhammad Ali, rahimahullah, right? Muhammad Ali, rahimahullah, he said, I'm not going to go to Vietnam and kill these people who have not done anything against me in the name of a government that oppresses me and my people every single day. So he did not go to fight. He went to jail. I think it was 3 years or 5 years. He went to jail, but he did not go to fight in Vietnam. Okay? So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him, rahimahullah, that he stood up for his principles. And this is exactly one of these cases where you are forced to do something where basically what did they want him to do? They want him to go there and kill people, right? But he says, I'm not going to do that. I would rather go to jail. If that's what I have to do, I'm not going to do that. So, and also, you have to look at the act that one is being coerced to perform. What is the act that you're being coerced to perform? So let's say that a person is being forced on gunpoint or under threat of their life that you have to eat pork. Okay? So in this case, you eat the pork because the threat is far greater. And this is something which we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forgiven. If they say that, if you don't say that I am, na'udhu billah, that I have left Islam. There are cases like this as well. So in this case, you are allowed to say it in order to avert that threat from you, which was the case of Ammar ibn Yasir, that he was forced, they were torturing him, and he said that, na'udhu billah, you have to say something bad about Allah and His Messenger. And he said it, and then he was worried that, what have I done? And the Prophet ﷺ said that if they return to do what they were doing to you before, then you again can say that. As many times as you need to, you are allowed to say something as long as your heart is not pleased with what you're saying. As long as your heart is not pleased with what you're saying. One of the things the scholars say is that one thing that you're not allowed to do under coercion is to take an innocent life. Okay, if somebody says to you that, hey, we're going to kill you if you don't kill this person. So they say that all human life is equal, whether they are Muslim or not. If they have not committed a crime, all human life has the same sanctity, innocent blood. And you cannot say that my life is more valuable than this person. So in this case, you say, well, if this is my time to go, it's my time to go, but I'm not going to do this. Okay? Because you cannot say, well, I have, such and such, and this person doesn't, so let me kill them. No, all human life is equal in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, we all have to die anyways. Right? This is one thing that we always have to remember, that sometimes we are trying to avoid death by doing things which are, the bizarre, that don't make sense, while the reality is that death will come anyways, right? Death will come anyways. So if death will come anyways, and here I have a situation where I could get a blessed death if I did not, take those aversive maneuvers. I might die, but I will die a good death. So this is not something that should worry a person. That if this is the case, then this is what it is. Like one of the scholars, Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, he was diagnosed with cancer. And he was brought over to the United States to get treatment. So they told him, they did the assessment and test and everything. And they said that your cancer has spread this much. And we have, these radiation or chemotherapy or whatever, these treatments we have. So he said that, will this cure the cancer? They said, no, it will not cure. It has spread too far. It might give you an extra 6 months. Okay? So he said, you know what? I am already, 75 years old or whatever he was. He's like, I don't need to go through this painful and very, uncomfortable treatment to just get another 6 months of life. I have to go anyways. So if this is the time, then I'm pleased with this. And this is something which Sharia allows, that if you ever are faced with a treatment for a disease, and that treatment does not really make a significant difference of quality of life and give you, it's not like proven that this will cure, as a test. You can actually choose to say, you know what, if this is my time, then this is my time. I'm pleased with this. In fact, whenever I hear that somebody has cancer, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all from having to go through a lot of pain and purification. But any time that a person gets a death where they are given advance notice, okay, you have 3 months to live, you have 6 months to live. What more can a person ask for? Right? We're all going to die anyways. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us and says, you know what, Jawad, you have 3 months to live. Make your peace with your friends and family. Take care of your affairs. Write letters to your kids. And get prepared to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make tawbah. If I do whatever I want to try to avoid this, maybe within 6 months, I avoid the cancer by doing all this stuff, which again, they say that, I'm not saying that this is what you're supposed to do. I'm saying that if the treatment is not, proven to make a significant difference. What if a person does all of this, and before the actual time comes to an end, which they were given, maybe they get into a sudden car accident and they die on the highway. And it happens, right? So you're trying to avoid one death, but death is coming one way or another, right? You all know this famous movie series, I think is probably based on a book called Final Destination, which is that these people, they basically, one person has this vision that they're about to die. So they get off that bridge, which is about to collapse, and the bridge collapses. And the whole story is basically that death was there looking for them, and they cheated death by getting out of that car. So now death is chasing them, one after another, all of them die. Okay? Now, of course, this is just fiction, but the reality is not too far. which is, think about these people who died, I think was 16,000 feet underwater, right? In this Titan sub under the water. SubhanAllah, you hear these stories that, somebody was written to die at a certain place. And these people, they went in a sub which had done this multiple times before, right? So they didn't imagine that this is the last time that we're going down and this is going to explode in this way. But subhanAllah, even the angel of death would have worried that how are these people going to arrive at the place where I'm ordered to take their life? But that's where it was written, and that's where they arrived. I read a story from one of the shuyukh. He said that there was a man, he fell, there was a construction building, and they had put up the floors, but they had not built the walls yet. And he was on the third floor of that building, and not paying attention, he actually fell off the third floor of a building, and he fell straight on the road, on the sidewalk, and he got up. Everything was completely fine. And he was so happy. He's like, this is a miracle that I survived such a dangerous fall. He got up and everybody gathered around him. He said, you know what? I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to buy everybody juice as a way of thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he was crossing the road, a car hit him and he died from that. It's like, had he taken the stairs down to arrive at the time and place of his death, he would have been late. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes him down in the fastest possible way so that he could arrive at the place where he needs to be in order for his soul to be taken. So this is the reality. So the point that we were making is that if a person is ever facing a situation where they are asked to take somebody else's life, at that point we're supposed to say that if this is my time, I'm not going to take another innocent life. I'm not going to take another innocent life. So we said that the one who is doing the coercion must have the ability to carry out what he's threatening in order for it to be considered this type of coercion. And it could be anyone. It doesn't have to be only the ruler. They say, for example, if somebody threatens to harm you they say that, hey, I'm going to shoot you. So the first thing that the police ask if you ever make a report is like, do you know if this person has any weapons? And they will actually check his background and they will see if they can see any weapons on this. If that person actually has weapons, then that threat will get upgraded, that this person needs to be dealt with immediately. But if they find out that this person doesn't own any weapons and he's going around telling people, I'm going to shoot you, then they say, okay, well, we'll go talk to him, but it's not like an ultimate priority right now. So, also they say that the person who's being coerced, let's say that a person is telling you, and you are a black belt in martial arts, okay, and this person is telling you, go do such and such. You have the ability to defend yourself. You have a pretty good chance that you are the one that's going to walk away and the other guy will not. So in this case, you don't have a 100% excuse to be coerced into something, okay? We had a teacher once in New York. He was a martial arts teacher, and this guy was skinny like you would think that it's just toothpicks wearing clothes. He was so skinny, but this guy was lethal in what he taught us in terms of jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and whatnot. This guy was lethal as to what he could have done, and if you came across him, you would think that, man, if I wanted to rob a guy, that's the guy I would rob because this guy is so weak, right? But you mess with this guy, this is the worst day of your life. So he must not have the ability to defend himself from the one coercing him or his threat. If he does have the ability to ward off that threat, or he can possibly flee from the situation, right? Let's say that you are Hussein Bolt, and somebody is saying, hey, come here, I need your money. You can run and this guy can never catch up to you. Or get help from others, right? Maybe you're in a situation where you can get help from others, then this person is not considered to be coerced. Okay, we're going to skip some of the detailed discussion between the madhahib with regards to the threat. So there are some acts that one is forbidden to perform even while under coercion. Okay, and we give you an example of taking an innocent life. Then there are those acts that one is required to perform, while under coercion. So, for example, minimal haram things, eating something haram or things like that. You can say it. There's no reason that you have to do it. And then there are those acts that one is allowed to perform under coercion, though it is considered better and more virtuous for the person to abstain from them. Okay, meaning that you don't have to go through serious harm for something which was not so significant in terms of the bigger picture. Like, for example, if somebody wants you to, in China, if you are a Muslim, you are on a list, and in the month of Ramadan, in these areas, you're not allowed to fast. So they're going to watch you if you're eating your lunch or not. If you don't eat your lunch, then you will get arrested. Your whole family might get arrested. You might even get executed. You might get seriously tortured, and a lot of harm could come. So in this case, a person should not bring about all of that trouble upon himself and upon his family, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has clearly given us a ruqsa that a person can eat, and this will not be considered as them breaking their fast. This is under duress. But the third case, as we said, in which case a person is better and more virtuous for a person to abstain from them. In such cases, the permissibility of normally forbidden act is known as a ruqsa or concession due to special circumstances. So you may take the ruqsa, you may not take the ruqsa. You may take the ruqsa or you may not take the ruqsa. The accountability for the coerced one, although the coerced and the one doing the coercion share in the responsibility of the act, the punishment of each may be differ, given that one was the actual cause and the other one was coerced. So for example, if somebody forces you to break someone's window, okay, so who will pay for this window once both of them are arrested? The person who forced the guy, they will be responsible for it. The other person is responsible, but once they are able to explain that, look, this person had some sort of a threat against me, and if I didn't do it, I was afraid for my own safety or whatever, that's why I did it. So of course they will not be punished in that way. Maybe they might get some lighter punishment that, why do you hang out with this person? Why, we say to our kids that if this kid is bullying you, why do you keep going to hang out in the same place where this kid always hangs out? Right? We're not holding you responsible for the bad thing that you did, but we are holding you responsible for being there when you repeatedly keep going to this person, right? So if a person was coerced to divorce his wife, or coerced to marry a woman, or coerced to sell a specific item, so what would be the case? Would the divorce count? Would the marriage count? Would the sale count? What do you think? It would not count? So this was actually a famous case, and this is one of those things where Imam Malik was actually whipped until his shoulders were dislocated. And the issue was that during the time of Imam Malik, the Abbasid rebellion became successful in the area, and they basically gained enough power that they basically took over areas, and they forced everyone to pledge allegiance. They forced everyone to pledge allegiance to the Abbasid Khalifa. So someone came and asked Imam Malik that, "Ya Imam," and I think that it was that whoever reneges from this rebellion, his wife is divorced from him. Okay? So someone stood up and they asked Imam Malik in public. They said, "Ya Imam, if a person is forced to divorce his wife under coercion, does that divorce count or does it not count?" Okay, now this is a very loaded fatwa, right? In a charged political situation, you're asking a scholar in public If somebody was forced to do such a thing, would that actually matter or not? And Imam Malik said that he read this hadith and he said that whatever is coerced, whatever is forced, it does not count. Okay, the pen has been lifted from that. So it will not actually be divorcing your wife if a person, basically, if you were forced to pledge allegiance, then that allegiance itself didn't count. So if you were to go against this person, then that would not be considered treachery, and that would not end up in the divorce of your wife. So they basically arrested him, and they said, you have to say that it will count. And he said that this is my fatwa, that it will not count, and I cannot change it. I have no evidence against it. So they whipped him until they saw that he will not give up. They basically let him go, but he went through that persecution. So we already gave this example, which is that if somebody forces you to destroy someone's property, and it was proven that you were forced and you did not want to do it, so the person who forced you will be the one who would be responsible for that. So now, one last thing I would mention from this hadith is that it tells us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives a person if they do something out of a mistake or forgetfulness, and one is forced to do something, right? Now, there are other narrations and other evidences which add other categories to it, okay? So, if a child does something, child is young, and they say that the age of 7 years old is the age of distinction between right and wrong, okay? Under 7 years old, if a kid, there are actually cases in America where a kid maybe is playing with dad's gun, and they end up shooting somebody. Okay? So Islamically, if they were under the age of 7, then they will be treated differently. And if they were above the age of 7, but under the age of puberty, then they would be treated differently. Okay? Puberty is the legal age in Islam. After that, you are 100% adult. So between the age of 7 to the age of puberty, that's where there is a middle class of what would have to be dealt with in this case. But someone under 7 years old, anything that they do, it would not be looked at as a crime. They should not be punished, but rather they don't know what they're doing, and they are dealt in that case. So another category of this is that if somebody is ignorant of something and they could not have learned about it. Okay, if somebody is ignorant of something and they could not have learned about it. So if somebody has been Muslim for 40 years and they do not know how to recite Surah Al-Fatiha properly, and although they do not have any sort of impediments in their speech or tongue or anything like that, do you think that this person is responsible for not knowing Surah Al-Fatiha? It would be, right? But if somebody just became Muslim, and by the way, I'm only saying Surah Al-Fatiha because that's required in Salah, okay? No other surahs, you don't have to recite any other surah, your Salah is still valid. It's sunnah to do so, but your Salah is still valid. So any person who just became Muslim, maybe last week, does this person have a legitimate excuse to not be able to recite Surah Al-Fatiha? Yes, of course, right? So these are things that we have to look at, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He forgives someone for something that was done out of a mistake, out of forgetfulness, but a lot of times we tend to be a lot less forgiving, right? And we need to, if Allah is willing to forgive, then who are we to not forgive? So we have to deal with people's mistakes, keeping this in mind, that if it is done out of forgetfulness, out of a mistake, out of being coerced for some reason, sometimes somebody is doing something and there's something going on in their life that you don't know about, okay? So we should take those things into consideration and deal with people in that way. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us all the tawfiq to be wise, to be knowledgeable of the people's circumstances. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are protected from ever having to judge in people's cases. But if we ever have to judge, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to that which is the truth. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Any quick questions or comments? Alhamdulillah, we have completed hadith number 39. So we only have 3 more hadith to go in this series, and then inshallah we'll be starting a new series on fiqh. We'll start from the beginning and we'll cover many chapters in fiqh inshallah. So.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله